Hey everybody, Steven here, and today I have the Wandr from OneScreen. This is a very unique product for the channel. I've never reviewed anything quite like this. This is essentially a 32-inch tablet that is on a neck and base that can move this around. It has a built-in high capacity battery, so you don't need to leave it plugged in all the time. You can literally move this wherever you need to, and you have this massive tablet to do whatever you want. So anything that you can do with a tablet, you can actually do with this. That can range from streaming content through Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, YouTube. You can play music through Spotify. You can use any social media app, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. You can do live streaming. You can do Zoom meetings. I'm going to be showcasing me training clients with this. You can play games. You can do presentations, work from home. Again, anything that you could do on a tablet, you can do with this because this is a tablet. It is running Android 13 with this. And so you get the Google Play Store, any of the Google apps. Again, just think of this as a 32-inch 4K tablet that you can move wherever you need it, and it comes with a webcam as well. So when we're talking about doing those live streams, it's not like you need to have your own webcam. You can use your own webcam, but they actually have one that just clips right into this, so you can use that as well. But before I get too ahead of myself here, let's cover the technical specifications. So this is a 4K IPS panel with an LED backlight. This runs at 60 Hertz. This has 320 nits. This has a 3000:1 contrast ratio and can display HDR content. This has Android 13 with an octa-core processor. It has a Mali 610 MP4 GPU, 8 gigs of RAM, and then 64 gigs of storage. This has a built-in dual array microphone with a 16 feet pickup range. This has 2 5-watt speakers that get incredibly loud. I usually showcase a sample of how loud speakers can get on regular monitors. This one gets so loud, I'm not actually going to showcase that test. They are really good though. This of course is a touchscreen, but it has a maximum number of 10 touch points. And then this does have Wi-Fi capability and Bluetooth 5.1. And for ports, this has one HDMI 2.0 that does support 4K at 60 Hertz. This has one USB 2.0, one USB 3.0, and then you have one USB Type-C port on the top molding of the screen. And again, that's where you would plug in the webcam, which is a 12 megapixel webcam. For the power here, this does need 90 watts of power, so you are going to get a larger charging brick. It does come with a decent cord length to it, but this thing has a built-in battery, which is a 9500 milliamp battery. So with this, it takes about 3 hours to charge, but you can get 4 to 6 hours of use out of it from that full charge. That of course is going to be dependent upon how bright that you actually have the screen and then what you're using this for. Looking at some of the physical features, this has a champagne color to it. This weighs 39.5 pounds for everything. I'm assuming the base is probably 30 pounds. It does weigh quite a bit here, but that is going to anchor this screen. It doesn't feel like this can topple over at all. And it also has those wheels, so it'd be really hard to actually topple it. It's just going to glide on the surface that it's on. For the adjustments that you can make with this though, this has a total height adjustment of 8.9 inches, and then this can tilt 15 degrees forwards and 25 degrees backwards. This can't swivel to the left and right because the whole thing on the base is just going to rotate on the ground, so you actually don't need that. But last, you do have pivot, and this can rotate 90 degrees to the left or right. So you can put this in that vertical orientation here, which is great if you're consuming any content that needs that type of aspect ratio, or if you're doing any Zoom meetings or something like that, where it just is going to work better if you have that aspect ratio, that orientation versus horizontal. And then inside of the box, you will get the power brick with cable. You get the 12 megapixel webcam, you get a Bluetooth remote and the batteries, and then you get all of your handouts. And one of those is going to have the information on the warranty, which this has a 1-year warranty. So moving forward, I want to break this down into a handful of various sections where I talk about specific things, starting with hardware. And I'm going to showcase footage of a ton of different use cases. Some of these will line up to exactly what I'm talking about. Some of these won't. So it'll seem like a little bit of a mix up when it comes to these. But I'm doing that to just showcase as many different ways that you could use this as possible, because there are a ton here. Now, starting with the hardware, more specifically, the overall build quality. I really like the fact that they went with aluminum because this feels very sturdy. It doesn't feel like it's going to, one, tip over easily, but if it did tip over, it's not going to just break into a bunch of different pieces because it's not made of plastic. So that to me is a huge plus. When it comes to the screen, they do have a matte coating on this. You could go with a glossy finish, which would make the colors pop more on screen, but that is also a trade-off because you're going to see more smudge marks on this screen, which, speaking of smudge marks, you do see those regardless. This is a touch screen, so when you are on a darker screen or something like that, be mindful. It's a tablet. You're gonna see all those fingerprints all over the screen here. I do think, again, the trade-off would have been if they went with a glossy finish, the colors pop more, but you would notice those finger marks all over the device. You also would notice more scratch marks on that as well. So I think that's why they went with this matte finish. Overall, the colors still look good. They still pop on this thing, but I do think some people may question as to why they went with a matte coating versus a glossy one. I also like the mechanical adjustments that this has. So the height adjustment, easy to use. It has a good amount of height adjustment that it can achieve. And then when we're looking at the pivot, when you're looking at the tilt, everything just moves really smooth. And that goes all the way down to the base where you have those wheels. So when you're pushing this around, as long as you have a nice flat surface, you're not going to have any issues there. So for overall build quality and durability, I think they did a really good job with the Wandr screen here. Moving to the internal hardware, I think they did a good job with the components. The one thing I would have liked to have seen was probably like 16 gigs of RAM versus 8, just to speed things up a little bit. And that's not to say that this thing is incredibly slow by any means, but it does feel like it's not quite as snappy if you have a newer phone. You can tell the difference between the two. But across the board, when we're looking at performance, if you're multitasking, it does really well there. You can actually do split screen with this and it still does really well. Or if you're using it to draw, it actually does decent with that. There's a little bit of lag when it comes to that, but this isn't specifically designed for that type of work. But if you're getting into something like a game, it does depend on the game. If you're trying to play one that is more demanding, it may struggle a little bit with that. Or if you have too many applications open. So I would make sure that you close those out when you're done with them. And I'll talk a little bit more about gaming here in a little bit because I want to showcase some of that footage. I don't think that's the main draw in terms of use case with this, but it performed better than I thought it was going to, which was really nice to see. Again, it just would probably benefit from 16 gigs of RAM versus the 8 that it has. You also have 64 gigs of internal storage with no way to update that as far as I know. And that would be something like a micro SD card reader where you could put that card in there and then just leave it in there as that storage expansion. You still technically can. You can take an external SSD or HDD and you could plug it in via the USB A or C and then get more storage that way, but you have to leave that plugged in if you're especially running applications to it or anything like that. So if you needed long-term storage, that's one way that you could get it. Just keep in mind you have to leave that thing attached if you're using those applications or whatever is stored on there a lot. For most people though, and again, thinking about the use cases, I think the 64 gigs here though is going to be just fine. Now talking about those USB ports, I do like the extra ones that they come with because we have the 2 USB-A and then we have the 1 USB-C. The USB-C you can use for other devices, not just the webcam that you get with this. And with those USB ports, you can plug in a mouse and keyboard and then use it with this, which is awesome. So you aren't stuck just using your finger. You can use that keyboard and mouse, which makes this essentially a computer now. And so this is really easy to use with that mouse and keyboard. I was practicing like writing scripts on this. I had no issues when it came to input lag or anything like that. Everything ran extremely smooth with the mouse and keyboard. And so for me, this is going to be handy when I'm needing to read scripts for videos, or again, I just want a larger screen than what I'm currently using to actually write scripts. Or if I have this downstairs, I want to do a little bit of work. Like, it gives me another option now that I don't really have with the other devices that I own. And that's nothing against the iPads and those other things, but when I use a keyboard with that, it's harder to see. It's just smaller. with this much larger size, it does make workflow for me much easier. And with that split screen, it also makes it easier because I can have the script that I'm working on one side and then the information for the specs and all the other things that I need on the other side. So it just makes it easy to use with that as well. You can also use a controller with this for various games as long as the game allows you to connect the controller, which I found pretty interesting. I will talk about that more in a little bit. This also has a HDMI port, and I did test the PlayStation 5 on this. Again, I don't think this is the intended use case here. I'm testing a lot of different things, but this did work on the PlayStation 5, and it actually worked pretty well. So we're running 4K 60 Hertz. There's going to be some screen limitations here, so you can do this at 4K or you can do this at 1080p. At 4K, I noticed that there was some flickering, but there is a setting that you can change to -1 that actually eliminates that. It's actually labeled, hey, if you're having issues with flickering, adjust this. There's a little bit more stuttering on this that can occur than a regular TV or monitor, but I don't think, one, anybody's going to be primarily gaming on this device. And two, it's going to be anything that's so apparent to most people that they're going to be like, I'm just not going to game on this at all if they wanted to use this. You can also connect various devices to the Type-C port on the top. That's for the webcam, like I mentioned. That also includes other webcams if you don't want to use the one that comes with this, but I don't necessarily recommend that. And I'm going to cover that in a little bit. So now that I've covered the hardware, I want to talk about the software. This is going to be a little bit harder because I'm not going to cover all the details of Android 13 and what you get on this. There's just a lot here. For anybody that's used Android devices, this is going to be very familiar to you. You're going to be able to use this and know where everything is at. iOS users, it might take you a minute to kind of figure out certain things, but after that, this is a breeze. It is very user friendly. There's a lot that you can do when it comes to customization, which I really like, especially compared to iOS. But generally speaking, this has such a wide range of use cases. It's a large scale tablet. I keep coming back to that. So anything that you can do there, you can do here. So there's just so many things. It's going to boil down to, what do you specifically need this for? And will it do that really well for that thing? For me, I mentioned I want to use this with clients where we're doing online sessions, and I can use the webcam and I can actually have a larger screen to see them do the movements, but also to showcase to them as well. Like, it's just going to give me an easier way to do that than just my phone. The other thing is, at my training studio, I can use this for having YouTube videos up that I want that showcase certain movements or skills, or it's talking about certain things that I cover inside of the studio with my clients. It could have presentations up there. It could be an easier way for me to do presentations. It can be an easier way for me to cover different information with my clients when it comes to their specific program. I can use this if I'm trying to just tell everybody, like, hey, I have an upcoming event or I have a workshop coming up. When clients bring in their kids, like, a lot of times it's like, oh man, we got to try and figure out, like, they bring a tablet usually at this point, but it's like that entertains them for a second, then they start wandering around and they want to touch stuff in the studio. If I have this there, it's going to be more appealing than their smaller tablet. And I'm going to have games on this thing. They can come up and they're going to really enjoy that. And especially if there's multiple where they can play a 2-player game on this, it has enough screen real estate to do that, which is awesome. And I'm not even listing every potential thing. There's so many. There's just a huge list of things that I could do here. Again, whether that's with clients, it's with the channel here, it's just at home with my family and my kids and letting them play games on this thing. Or we're in the kitchen and we want to look at a recipe that we're working on and we can have all the ingredients right there. We can look at the YouTube video for what they're actually telling us we need to do step by step. Whatever it may be, this can do that. As you get into very specific things that you need, that's where it's going to be, is this going to be the right fit for you or not? The best example I had that kind of came to my mind as I was testing things is like artwork. Like, if you're, hey, I need a tablet that does artwork very well, I don't know that this is geared towards you. To me, this is like the jack of all trades type of tablet here. And so in this example, If you need it for artwork, you're a professional artist, like you're going to use the tablet that is best for that type of work. You can still draw on this though. And actually you can do a good amount of things with this. What I would say is it depends on the proficiency that you have with the device that you're using. I started just kind of doodling on this thing and I was like, this is actually pretty decent. But if I was a professional artist, the stylus most likely has a delay that I don't want. It also is probably not the surface that I'm looking for. Like there's Wacom tablets and there's these other things that they're going to look for that. But let's say they do a bunch of different things. They're like, hey, I do presentations on art and I actually showcase to my clients my pricing sheet or how my workflow goes, or I need to actually just do like a Zoom meeting with them. But then I also need to draw on top of that. This would still fit their needs. It does it well enough that will get them by. And again, this does depend on your skill. And I am by no means an artist, but I still enjoyed messing around with this and just kind of doodling to see what this could do with a stylus pen in an application. So the big takeaway here for the software, what do you want to do? Do you need something that is hyper specific? If it is hyper specific, make sure that this will suit those needs. For me, it would be things like Zoom meetings, presentations, multitasking with applications, writing scripts like I do for the channel here, using various applications at the same time, using this around the house with your kids to play games, using this to actually look at videos where you're trying to do a recipe when you're cooking, having this in the bedroom where you're like, hey, I don't either have a TV or you just don't want to use that one that is in there for whatever reason. You have this as an option. And the cool thing is you can watch in the 16:9 or the 9:16. So you can actually turn this vertical. So when you're watching YouTube shorts or TikTok or anything that is in that orientation, you can watch it in that native aspect ratio, which is awesome because a lot of times, one, the device may not be able to do that, or if you do it, it's going to have black bars on the side. It's just going to look weird. Here you have either the 16:9 or the 9:16 and everything looks really good. So now that I've covered the software, some of the use cases here, I want to talk about the webcam and testing this out. Overall, it does a decent job. The resolution doesn't look as crisp as your phone or a smaller device. And I think that's going to be a trade out here. So when I was testing out the webcam, initially I thought it might just get a better image quality out of one of my really high-end webcams, so I traded them out. It actually looked about the same, maybe even slightly worse, which leads me to believe that the webcam that they have here, if you were to like plug that into your PC, like a regular PC, it probably looks really good, which makes me think potentially it's a software limitation. I'm not 100% sure on that, because if I use a webcam on my normal PC, the larger the screen, the more I notice that it doesn't look quite as crisp. It looks a little bit more grainy. And I think that's potentially what I'm running into with this, is that you have this very large size, but again, it comes with the trade out, which is just not going to look quite as crisp as your smaller device. And so we have that trade out, but I do think it is worth it in a lot of use cases. So if I am training my clients, it just makes more sense to have this larger device where I can see more of what they're doing, and I can actually situate this better than my phone, much better than my phone. There's also use cases where you're FaceTiming family and you literally pull this up to the table like they have a seat at the table, or just hanging around in the living room, and this just is an easier thing. Like, I don't want to whip out my phone and be like, all right, let's all look at this small image of this family member there. That's hard to do. Here, literally turn it to that vertical orientation, put it over, and it's like they're there because it is the larger size. And then you can move them around as well, so they're not stuck in that one spot, and I don't have to sit there and hold my phone. It just makes it easier to do those things. So I think the webcam here is a home run. Yes, there's a trade out, but for the use cases, it is definitely worth it when it comes to using this larger screen and the things that you can do with it compared to your phone or a small tablet. And of course, with that webcam, we do have the built-in microphone. Here they say it has about a 16-foot pickup range. It's decent. It's not something, if I was doing a lot of these online training sessions, that I would use all the time. You have the USB ports. You can plug in a microphone, and that's what I would do in that instance so I could get better clarity, especially if I'm moving beyond that 16-foot range, which sometimes I do when I have these online sessions. So for me, it's just easier to plug in an external microphone and use that so I can get a little bit better sound quality, or just keep the microphone closer to me so it doesn't sound like I'm far away. In a more intimate setting where you are closer to the screen, just use the built-in. But if you are going to be moving further back, I would say get an external microphone that has a USB plug-in, and if it is wireless, even better, and then you can just use that and you will get better audio quality. Next, I did want to cover the battery really quick. So we have that 9500 milliamp battery here, charging time 3 hours, and then you get about 4 to 6 hours out of it. Just testing this out, I found that to be true, but it depends on how bright this is. So if I turn the brightness all the way up, you're going to get closer to the 4 hours. If you turn that down, you'll get more like 6. And it also depends on, are you running a bunch of applications, which is something that I mentioned earlier. When you're done, just close that thing out, because if you have a bunch of applications running in the background, you're going to drain the battery even quicker. So just keep those things in mind. But again, generally speaking, I found that I do get about 4 to 6 hours depending on what I'm doing, how I'm using this, the brightness levels. I'm getting that out of this device, which is really nice. So for anybody that needs this for presentations and things like that, you can just unplug this, wheel this wherever you need it, use it, and then bring it back. Most of the time though, if I'm just using this in the office and I'm again writing a script or I'm looking at something, like I just leave it plugged in and I can use it that way, and then I don't even have to worry about it. And last here, I wanted to talk about the gaming experience that I had with this. This isn't the main intent of this device, but I thought it was interesting that you could actually game on this thing. You could plug a controller into it. You could use it with that controller for certain games that allowed for it. Overall, I was a little bit fascinated with that because it's not something that, again, I think is the main intent, but looking at what I do with the channel, that is what I'm more geared towards. So here, plugging in a controller, as long as it allows for that. I did a racing game. You can use that controller and it was very seamless. No issues. I did try it in Minecraft. That to me is a more demanding game on the hardware. I ran into an issue there where it kind of locked up and then it just started like spinning around, like the input got stuck. I think that is because it is a more demanding game. When I was using it with the car game, no issues at all, but it is a less demanding game. You play certain games, like I played a Mario Kart game, it doesn't allow for a controller at all. You actually have to use the touchscreen. So with that, that was pretty interesting. It also needed the vertical orientation, that 9:16, and it was really fun to play. So here for the games and using this with a controller, one, does it actually allow a controller to be used with it? And then two, how demanding is that game, because the hardware here may be limited. So you do have the potential to game with this, but just keep in mind, again, certain limitations. When plugging in the PlayStation 5, I found that interesting as well, that I could do 4K 60 Hertz, make that subtle adjustment where you're not going to get the flickering. 1080p wasn't quite as crisp. It performed about the same. So I would say, generally speaking, I probably would just leave this in 4K 60 Hertz because it just visually looks a little bit better. Colors really pop off the screen. If you wanted to use this with an Xbox, PlayStation 5, a Nintendo Switch would be really good with this. You do have the ability to do that. And so now you have even more use cases. So for me, this may be an instance where I use a Nintendo Switch or console up at the training studio because I want to entertain my clients' kids when they do come in. Or I want to use it at home. I'm in bed, I don't feel good, and I want to get a Nintendo Switch and have that a little bit closer in terms of the screen to me versus the main TV that we use that's a bit further away and it just doesn't look quite as good when I'm gaming on it. So we have options for this that are really cool to see that I wasn't expecting when I first started looking at this product. So you can use this for gaming. It can be a really good experience, and you do have a wide spectrum of use cases, even for gaming, that you could use this with. So in conclusion, I think the Wandr screen here is an incredible device with such a large range of use cases with it. There's just so many things that you can do with this, and that to me is the big selling point. If it underperformed, if it didn't have all those use cases, if the webcam wasn't any good, if the battery life wasn't any good, like these would all be these massive negatives where I'd be like, hey, this isn't something that you should even consider. But here they do deliver on all of those fronts. So as a total package, this does feel like this jack of all trades device where you can use it in so many different situations. Just hone in, what do you need this for? And it most likely is going to fit that need. When you get hyper specific, that's again where I use the drawing. If you're a professional artist, maybe not the best device for you. But if you're using this in a multitude of ways, I'm doing a presentation, I'm FaceTiming a client, but I'm needing to sketch really quick to just showcase a client something, then this will fit your needs. Small businesses and all the different use cases there. Here's our menu, and using this for the display on there, showcasing video. Like I just can keep going on and on with certain situations where you could use this device, which is the main reason why I like it so much. So this gets a huge thumbs up from me. I really like the Wandr screen here. It does come at a premium price, but you are getting a premium product. So I don't like to tell people what to do with their money. That is 100% whether or not it is worth it to you. I think this is definitely worth it. And for anybody out there that currently uses a tablet for various use cases that wants something larger, this would be an easy recommendation on my part because you can do that and so much more with it. If you have any questions about this, let me know in the comment section. I will make sure to answer that for you there. And I will have a link for this in the description so you can pick this up if you want to. And that's going to wrap this video up. If you like the video, hit the like button for me as it helps the channel out. If you want to continue to follow along with all my content, hit the subscribe button for me. And as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.